This is as much of anything is a presentation about what we have upon us as far as tax risk in retirement. The old way, the way that our parents and our grandparents retired was through a pension. Just about every company that of any size, the federal government, state government, local governments, all your blue chip companies, manufacturers and the like, had pensions available for their workforce. And we know it. We've seen it. Our grandparents and parents, a lot of them are on a pension now. That's not really available to many of us anymore. But what used to look like, and we're using more of today's figure, is that if you had an income of about $100,000, your pension was about $60,000, let's say. Social Security maybe made up $17,000, and other investment accounts would have maybe been around $8,000 a year in retirement. So what happened, right? Why do we not have a pension anymore? The figures on the screen show you what it used to look like, but now people are living longer. The actuaries who helped to build these pensions didn't anticipate people living as long as they're living now in retirement. And so it wasn't a sustainable system as we began living longer. Here's a little picture of Philip Morris. They, of course, had a pension, and they gave out cigarettes too. I think it was something like a pack a day. And so they both had a healthy pension but had an unhealthy workforce, which worked out perfectly for them. So here are more recent figures if you want to know. We've gone from about 50% new hires in 1998 having access to a pension to 2015, we're at 5%. Very, very few companies have those. The state governments do. The federal government's plan is really poor now. They only get about 1% of their annual salary in pension per year that they work. So here's what a new retirement system looks like. This is what we're left with. Those same companies, the ones that used to provide pensions, have moved away from that, and now they've gone to more of a 401k match. The ones that do have those, today, the kids coming out of college and people our age, if they start a job with a 401k, that's what they're having to rely on. That plus Social Security. It's different. It's a little bit more scary, right? You have more control over your investment choices. We get that, but are we making the smart decisions that we need to make in order that we know that we have enough money in retirement to live the lifestyle that we want then?
So it's not like companies or corporations have stopped paying for benefits for their employees. It's actually to the contrary. I think they're still living up to their end. It's just been a shift. And so the shift has been more on the health insurance front. We've seen it firsthand with the cost of health insurance. A lot of companies are still trying to foot the bill on that, but at an increased cost, they've got to cut in other ways to still sustain a viable business. And so, the other piece of that is, a pension really to them is a liability. One thing that they've looked at is to kind of open up or have options on what we call a defined contribution plan, which is pretty much synonymous with a 401k plan. So they're giving their employees the tools to kind of shape their retirement, and in some cases that comes in form of a match. You put in a certain percentage, the company matches that, and then if you were to leave that company or retire, you take that with you, and then you pick the investment choices within it. But the reality is almost half of employers out there don't even have a 401k match. They offer it, but they just aren't in a position to match it. The average or the median is about a 3% match. So you put in 3, the company matches 3, and hopefully you continue to do that and, again, build a robust retirement for yourself. So they're kind of taking that responsibility or liability off their plate and shifting that over to the employee. But I guess the question is, are employees really good at investing their retirement dollars? The short answer is they aren't. You can look at almost any track record you want. 30 years is kind of the longest one we have on here. And the average equity investor is getting about 4% per year versus the S&P 500 index over that same period of time, at least through 2017, had done a little over 10. So again, there's different time frames on here. Probably the most eye-opening thing to me is even the quote-unquote safer index, like a bond. So people that are can't even kind of keep up with the safer bond index. They're taking on the risk of an equity or stock type investor, but they're getting returns less than what a traditional bond or bond index would allow them to get.
So here's the good news. We've got some new tax laws coming up in 2018. You're going to see the top marginal rate come down. You're going to see a lot of people in a 12% tax bracket this year where they would have been a 15% last year, and a huge increase in the child tax credit, $2,000 per child, and $1,400 of that is literally refundable. So those of you who have a couple of children or more are going to see a big difference between last year's taxes and this year's taxes. Well, what does that mean? Where's the opportunity there? Well, the opportunity is that there are a few tax-free or later tax-free investment classes. So the time to get into something like that is when you can get into it at a discount, and that's where we're seeing tax rates today. From the years 1932 to 1981, about a 50-year period of time, the top marginal tax rate was 60%. And, you know, we're at a little more than half of that now. We're at a pendulum shift that's pretty far, I guess if you want to call it right, on taxes right now. And so a lot of people are predicting big, larger deficits, $1.46 trillion over the next 10 years, based on some of the numbers that we're getting. Now, it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you find yourself on, we know that there are pendulum shifts, and we're going to go back the other way pretty soon. So the math doesn't work. These are real numbers. In 2013, 76% of federal income tax dollars were going to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on debt. The projection for 2020 is that 92% of our federal tax dollars are going to those programs. So with historically low tax rates now, the math just doesn't work for keeping it that way. There has to be more revenue coming in to service those platforms.
It's different. The companies have shifted their liability away to things like a 401k plan, and money that people contribute to that is pre-tax money. So you're able to deduct that on your taxes every year. The reality is, though, when you retire, when you want to access that, then all those distributions are then going to get taxed as ordinary income. So not long-term capital gains, which are in many cases cheaper than ordinary income tax rates, but they are going to get taxed at ordinary income. And even non-qualified accounts, you've got short and long-term capital gains rates. And even one thing that we found interesting is Social Security, the system that everybody has been paying into for a period of time. If your what's called provisional income is above $32,000 a year, even your Social Security can and will be taxed. So there's a chart up on the screen that just kind of walks you through numbers above that. But it's not too hard to potentially get above $44,000 a year. In this case, when you start adding in 1099 income or interest. Any employment that you're doing while you're collecting Social Security, that could ding you. If you've got rental property, rental income kind of counts against that provisional income, and even interest on municipal bonds counts against that. So in a lot of cases, if you start coming in above those thresholds, then now your Social Security is going to get taxed as well. What can we do about it? What are some potential tax-free alternatives that we can add some dollars to? So, I mean, really the main ones that we know of are, I just referenced municipal bonds. That's maybe one place to go. Your upside is going to be pretty much muted, but any interest that accrues off of municipal bonds through state and local institutions the interest is tax-free. And then really the other two vehicles, one is available potentially, the other one depends really more on your employer. One is the Roth IRA. Many people have probably heard of that. If you have the ability to contribute to one of those, depending on your income and cash flow situation, whatever we tell you the rest of this call, that's one of the first places, if not the first place to go, especially after a match you get on your 401k plan, to take advantage of or potentially max out every year. Any money that you put into a Roth, you don't get the pre-tax break, but any money you pull back out later is tax-free. Same with the Roth 401k. More companies are adopting that, not all, but if you can take advantage of a 401k with the Roth component to it and then have money growing tax-free when you pull it out, I think that's really the next best place to go. So we talked about not paying taxes because we just don't know. I think it's that uncertainty of what potential tax rates are going to be. We always assume as a planner that they're going to be lower because you're going to have lower income, but we just don't know that.
So here's something that really has been more of a tool used by the affluent or the wealthy for the last 50 years probably, and that is a retirement type plan that's built inside of a life insurance framework. Now, this isn't new, of course, but it's definitely more new to middle income folks. It hasn't been, or those group of people really haven't been targeted for this type of thing. And I wouldn't really venture to guess the reasons why. Maybe uncertainty, had something to do with it about whether it was smart to allocate, your limited investment dollars into something like this. But, as it stands now, we've got a very, very long history of people using a life insurance framework in retirement, and it's been working incredibly well. Here's an example of how that could work and does work on a 35-year-old male, and we're using 7% of $100,000 income in this example. So just to make the math easy, $7,000 per year put into this plan from age 35 to age 64, which would have been something like what a pension would be that we know isn't available anymore. What we're going to get from that is that we get to take back out $34,000 per year in retirement from age 65 to age 85. Or if we've stretched that from age 65 to age 90, we're getting out $31,000. Now, as we're talking about taxes, that's tax-free. So we don't know what the tax rates are going to be when this guy is 30 years older and he's 65 years old, but we're cautious and suspicious that the tax rates are going to be quite a bit higher than they are now. So all in all, this is at a 6% return, which we'll show you what that means a little later, but this is $210,000 in contributions over that period of time. That creates $680,000 of tax-free retirement income.
So how does that compare to a tax-deferred account? So if we took the same $7,000 per year and put it into a non-matching 401k, I said a little bit earlier, you certainly want to take advantage of any kind of match that you get at your 401k, but if we also said that half of employers don't offer a match, we're going to use those percentage of people to show the difference here. So if you took that that same $7,000 per year and put it into a non-matching 401k to kind of compare similar situation, you would get back out a little over $31,000 per year from 65 to 85. Again, that's assuming a 20% federal tax bracket and a 7% state. So we're short there. In fact, over a 20-year period of time compared to what we just showed, you're about $52,000 short in your distributions over that same period of time compared to the policy itself. So what would you actually have to pull out from a tax equivalent perspective, say from your 401k or IRA, to hit those same numbers? Again, at the same tax bracket, you've got to pull out a little over $46,000 a year to hit that same $34,000 tax-free number. And if tax rates are even higher than that, then you're talking close to $55,000 per year to basically be the equivalent of the $34,000 tax-free number that we showed.
So here's some other advantages to putting a life insurance retirement plan in place that's not available anywhere else. It's in the name, life insurance. This is the only plan, the only pension type plan you can put in place, a retirement plan you can put in place that has a death benefit. Now, yeah, most people buy life insurance if they have a family, have heirs, or they have people who rely on them for their income. They probably have life insurance already. If they don't, then that's fine. That's something that has to be taken care of. But this plan sort of does both. So it's self-completing. What that means is that if you start this plan, you put the $7,000 in for a couple of years, you're only $14,000 into it. That plan may have a death benefit of $500,000 or $600,000. And so what I mean when I say it's self-completing, even if the person isn't around to continue funding the plan, the money is still available in retirement for the heirs. We've got some data points for you on how we're determining that this is a smart idea for folks. As I said earlier, this is something that's been around for years and years and years, and you know, any kind of pushback you get on something like this, and this is anecdotal, but you know, folks say, well, you know, this, why haven't I heard of this? This seems new, and new to me feels risky. Well, it's not new. Here's some data for you. Something recently came out, and this is industry jargon, but AG 49, it means Actuarial Guideline 49, has changed the way agents are able to illustrate these things. And what they did, and the Actuarial Guideline is written by the National Alliance of Insurance Commissioners. So basically all the states get together and they agree on this stuff. And so what they said is that you guys as agents can illustrate these plans at a maximum rate of 7.2%. And where they got those numbers is that they took 10,000 data points. Basically what that means is they took 10,000 days that you could have bought one of these policies starting in 1950, and they ran a real projection for a 25-year holding period and then basically dumped the policy after 25 years. And what they found out was that at the very worst, if you bought this on the very worst day, their data says that you're going to get somewhere in the 4% and change range return. At the very highest, it was like 10 and change. And so they're giving us an average of 7.2%, and they're using that as our very top end measurement. Now we don't use that. We don't use 7.2% because we don't need that kind of interest rate for these plans to work like they're supposed to. But here's some more interesting information, and definitely more current. Starting from 1980, on a 30-year holding period, and we're going back using 30 years for that 35-year-old guy retiring at age 65, the very worst since 1980 has been 7.2%. So this is just an indication of how conservative that might be. The average return since 1980 would have been 7.88%. Most people would agree that that's a pretty decent return. Here's another example for you. This is a real example. Taylor, age 39, is a NCSBI, State Bureau of Investigation agent, and he actually does have a pension. He's got a pension through the state, but we put a plan together to help him retire early. The cool thing about Taylor is he can retire at age 59. His wife is currently 35. She's a nurse. If he retires at 59 and she retires, she'll be 54. They both have a 401k. And so what we found out is that for Taylor, since when he's 59 and a half, he can take his 401k out with no penalty. He's going to bridge the gap to the time that Jenni can take her 401k out when she's 59 and a half. They're going to use those funds to make it to pension time for Taylor. Now, during the time that they're taking the pension, okay, they're also going to take the life insurance retirement plan that we put in place for them and supplement that pension amount. What that's going to do for them is get them a lot closer to where they are salary-wise. So instead of having something around 60 or 65 or 70% of his salary in retirement, we're going to get them a whole lot closer to 100%, and that's going to make them feel a lot more comfortable going in and through retirement. His pension is going to be somewhere around $4,500 a month. The IUL withdrawal is going to be $2,650 a month. Social Security for them is going to be $6,100 a month, just for him. Yeah. So that's, we're projecting big Social Security numbers. We hope that stays. We hope that remains as it is. Social Security for Jenni is going to be $6,000 a month. They're going to be able to live comfortably from their retirement benefits based on those numbers. $160,000 goes into the plan. $790,000 comes out. What we're doing here is actually putting the plan itself on Jenni. Now, it doesn't matter who the insured is. The plan framework is what we're after. But Jenni is the healthier of the two of them. We just got a better deal on her. Here's one of the things that some people ask us, why IUL? That's Equity Index Universal Life is what that is, versus UL versus whole life. Some people think, whole life is the best thing. That's because that's what my dad had, my granddad had. That's because that's what my neighbor has, or whatever. I have no stake in it. I don't care which one we choose. It just happens to be that we're finding that IUL works the best because it has a long track record of doing better than something like a universal life plan that has only a fixed account and a whole life plan that's running on dividends. This is something that's been going on for like the last 30 years or so. Dividends on whole life policies have been underperforming their projection ever since I've been in the business and even before. The framework still works. It still works the same. The taxation piece is exactly the same. You could put this in place and it would work in theory like it's supposed to. It just won't perform as well as we'd like. So for the last 30 years, whole life salespeople have put plans in place for their clients, basically expecting the same thing. But each year, the dividend rates have come down. So every policy basically that's been sold as a whole life policy in the last 20 or 30 years has underperformed its proposal to the client. Opposite to that, every indexed universal life policy that's basically been sold in the last 15 years, 20 years has outperformed its projection. That's pretty telling. So how? Like, what is that? What is indexing? How do they do it? Well, it's not a new strategy. Indexing is a way of investing your money in a framework that follows something else. And in this situation, we're following the S&P 500. There are other indices that we can follow as well. But you're not actually buying equities within the S&P 500. So we're relying basically on the smart people at the insurance company to get us this return. Well, how do they do it? And here's how. They take about 95% of the premium that we give them, that you give them every year. And this is the part that doesn't pay for the mortality cost. The mortality cost being the actual real cost that you're going to die every month, the risk that you're going to die every single month. Everything else going into this framework is going 95% into a bond strategy. Well, in that bond strategy that they're using, what they're wanting to do is basically get to zero. They're hoping to get to a 0% or 1% return for us. What that does is it protects us from huge downturns in the market. So we could have a 20 or 30% downturn in the market, and those equity investors lose 20 or 30% of their entire portfolio. And inside this plan, we're still at zero. That means we beat their portfolio by 30% if we're at zero. They take the other 5%, and this sounds like a small amount of money, but it isn't. This is a giant pool of money that insurance companies have. They take that 5% and they buy options. So what they're trying to do with that is they're trying to hit home runs with the options. They're working with hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're picking winners. And when they do pick a winner, like something like Netflix, so those are the kind of companies that they're after. So they're buying options on those companies, and they're hitting home runs, and that's getting us to what's called the cap. And so the cap rate on one of these IUL policies today is usually around about 12%. So we're gonna get somewhere between 0% and 12%, not lower, not higher, and that's getting us to the real interest rate that the policies are going to perform at. So here's another quick example for you. This is kind of a neat one. Jerry, who's age 50, and Susan, who's age 52, they own a screen printing company. They don't qualify for a Roth IRA because they make more money than what they allow for you to get into one. And they don't really plan on stopping working anytime soon anyway, but they're looking for that tax-free investment class since they don't have access to the Roth. They're really afraid that in their retirement or semi-retirement that they're going to have a super high tax rate. I don't disagree with them. What we did for them is on Jerry, we actually put the policy on him, and it made sense in this situation to put it on Jerry because he is definitely more of an operator of the business, so he needed life insurance anyway. In this situation, we don't have to buy two policies. We can just use the IUL policy as the policy that covers the death benefit that we needed on Jerry. I guess he's 50 now, so from age 50 to age 64, basically the next 14 years, we're putting in $25,000 per year. So that's going to be a total of $350,000, and they're going to begin taking that money out at Jerry's age 69, which they think is going to be somewhere around their retirement. And we're going to pull out $59,000 per year for the following 16 years, and that's going to accumulate to $900,000 out. So $350,000 in, $900,000 out, and that's at a 6% return. We've got some procrastinators out there. I get it, I really do. But what happens if you wait? I'm not going to tell you that you're going to miss the boat because maybe you won't. But you have to qualify for these plans. So medically, you actually have to qualify for this. Why doesn't everybody have one? Well, everybody can't get one. You have to medically qualify for the insurance in order to be able to buy it. These things have a surrender charge. The insurance company takes on a huge risk. They take on a lot of cost to do this, and so you wouldn't want to buy one of these with the idea that you're going to use it in less than 10 years. So you want to get into something like this expecting that after 10 years would be the time that you would use it. The platform itself, I'm not so worried that it's going to go away, but we don't know. We don't know if later the IRS is going to say, hey, you can't do these anymore. So there is some risk there. So here's another one. How come you haven't heard about this? There are a few reasons. There aren't a lot of insurance agents who really understand this or use this, or maybe they work for an insurance company as a captive agent and that company doesn't have them, and so they can only sell what they have. Financial advisors or money managers, they have more of a focus on what's called AUM, assets under management, and so they would prefer many times to keep your money invested in equities or whatever other platforms that they have for you. Here's why. They collect a they wouldn't call it a commission, but it's basically, let's say somewhere around 1% of the assets that they manage for you, they charge that each year. And so over time, a wealth manager, a money manager, or a financial advisor would charge a whole lot more in commissions than one of these life insurance plans would yield, 10 times more, 100 times more. We also find that CPAs, understanding that they focus on taxes many times, especially the ones who do your taxes for you, they don't have a lot of education on these. And this is a long-term tax play. And so think about the way a CPA thinks. They're thinking about, basically last year and this year. So the ones today are thinking about 2017 and maybe thinking about some planning for 2018, but this is not for that. This is planning for retirement. And so if you go to your CPA, they say, okay, well, what's left, right? You've got some money left over. If we put this into an IRA, it reduces our tax burden by X. Well, they're thinking that that's going to make you happy for this year because your tax rate is lower, or the amount that you pay the IRS is lower, and that can be true. But what does that do for you in retirement? So what can we take away? We've got this is the major problem. This is the uncertainty that we've got. We've got tax rate risk. This is a big time thing that not very many people are talking about. What if your taxes in retirement are 30% or 40%? Nobody is talking about that today, but that's something that I think we should worry about. Think about this too. The average equity investor does less than 4% return over that. We saw the figures over a 30-year period of time. They're not doing all that well. Now, we'd all like to think, especially lately, that we're better investors than that. But even if you looked at if you have a 30-year history and you looked at it, you'd be surprised to see that you're probably lower than you think you are. These plans, another thing to think about, the very worst 30-year track record ever since 1980, so almost 40 years, has been 7.2% inside of plans like this. And then this platform isn't anymore just for the rich. The rich, we're looking or are looking always to stuff away as much money tax-free as they can. This is a platform they've been using for a long time, but we can use it too. And so what then would happen in retirement if taxes overwhelm your savings? There's nothing you can do. You can't reduce your tax rate in retirement when you're being forced to pull money out of your IRA. It doesn't work like that. The only thing you can do is go get a job or something. The more tax-free investment classes we can put into someone's retirement plan, the better. Well, that's about it, guys.